Are you buying 4 new RRAT consoles to provide Adelaide approach services from Melbourne, or are you moving the existing consoles from Adelaide?
My understanding, Senator, is that we're buying 4 new ones to replace Adelaide, and that is to replace Adelaide and Cairns in Brisbane, because when we move one of the terminal control units, those consoles at that particular location will be used for the other location. So in other words, we need 4 as capacity. However, on top of that is that those 4 are not 4 extras specifically for the project, as we've got air traffic growth across the entire operation, is that we will need those extra 4 consoles to provide additional services. For example, providing new positions for Melbourne, Perth and Brisbane approach services with the introduction of the director positions.
How much will those 4 consoles cost?
Senator, I don't have that. I have to take that on notice.
So if the 4 consoles, system reconfiguration and all of the associated hardware and software changes will cost a budgeted $4.1 million, is that correct?
Senator, that sounds correct, but I'd need to double check when you're talking specifically about the consoles. There's pieces of configuration work around some of those sorts of things.
So you're going to give us on notice how much the consoles will cost, but there are software changes and there is a budgeted figure of $4.3 million in the business case, is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
CapEx, technical, engineering and communication equipment system. So if we go through the training costs to address the age profile exists regardless of whether the service is provided in Melbourne or Adelaide, and there is $7.3 million attributed to it, and that's carried across the TCU integration project. Is that the correct statement?
Yes, Senator.
There is $6.5 million allocated for training costs to meet the transition requirements.
So that is an overlapping requirement. So rather than train them as initial or ab initio trainees and transfer them to the Adelaide environment, we would be training them in a transition way where we'd be progressively transitioning them to Melbourne. So those things cover the same cohort of staff that are required to train in both locations.
So you're standing by that figure, and the opposing information we have is that is woefully inadequate. But you're saying you can achieve it. 6.5 allocated for training costs.
That was my understanding at the time of the business case, Senator.
Is there any accounting for avoidable training costs associated with retraining the 10 or so that are not permanently relocating to Melbourne or other ATC roles?
Sorry, Senator, could you just repeat that?
So is there any accounting for the avoidable training costs associated with the retraining of the 10 or so that are not relocating permanently to Melbourne in other ATC roles, for example, Adelaide Tower?
Yes, Senator. We've provided within some of those numbers the transition training should those people be reallocated to those roles.
So are these staffing efficiency gains optimistic?
I'd need to defer to my colleagues, Senator. My understanding of the development of the business case was that it was based on a view of what was achievable at that point of time, and I think as the planning has progressed over the last period of time, that some of those assumptions are proving to be the case, albeit that there will be some changes to some of the particular elements.
So, Mr. Logan, you're saying that the $7.9 million savings will be attained? You're the CFO.
So, in terms of the savings, Senator, and having read the business case, I think there's a mismatch in those 2 line items where what we're trying to say is if we train in situ, so in the current situation we would be incurring a certain amount of training costs to be able to manage the age profile that you've indicated earlier, and we're balancing that against what we've put into the project as the project costs, the total training of, in some cases, brand new air traffic controllers, and that those two numbers are slightly more expensive in going to Melbourne as above going in situ to Adelaide, and that the offset at large across the project is really about the cost of needing to upgrade the facilities in terms of the CMATS infrastructure and the supporting infrastructure in terms of the facilities and the increased resilience and business continuity that we're trying to achieve as we move forward into the One Sky program.
So what's going to be put to you, Mr Logan, clearly is that the TCU integration project is likely to be in excess of the 16.8 million budgeted for Adelaide, potentially many more times that amount. When weighed against the do-nothing costs net present value of 22.8 million, your argument that integration will present a positive long-term net present value is going to be tested. And Senator Bullock and myself and others will be here to make sure it is tested. So you're on notice there that there is work that's been done that says that basically your case doesn't stack up. You're putting your neck on the line, so to speak, in respect to this?
Senator, we did the business case at a point in time. My understanding is that the planning that's being done as we progress through the business case is firming up on some of those numbers, and we would be happy to keep the committee advised as to how those are progressing.
Thanks, Chair.
All right. I'm going to go to Senator Xenophon. But before I do that, have you advertised for a new CEO yet?
That's a matter for the board, Chair. My understanding is the board is...
I mean, it's such an incestuous so I won't use the F word, setup that the board will probably say, oh, we'll get one of our own little pet cats in there. Why wouldn't you advertise publicly?
My understanding, Chair, is that the board is about to publicly advertise the position.
Good.
One question, Chair.
No, you haven't. Senator Xenophon has.
Why you put in before me?
Oh, yeah.
Typical bloke.
I've got some questions directly supplementary to Senator Gallagher's questions.
I'm always good.
Can you advise if there's another airport in Australia with anywhere near the same number of RPT movements that Adelaide Airport has that uses a remote terminal control service to the surface of the airport?
Senator, just off the top of my head, a comparable airport is Coolangatta, Gold Coast Airport.
Right, so that's the benchmark.
Similar, yes.
Right. So is there another airport anywhere in your knowledge, even internationally, with anywhere near the same number of RPT movements that Adelaide Airport has that use a terminal control service to the surface of the airport, and that terminal control service is carried out from a location more than 100 nautical miles from the airport it provides a service to?
Senator, I'm not exactly sure of the exact distance, but the London Terminal Control Unit, which covers both Heathrow, Stansted, Gatwick and Luton airports, as well as London City.
They're a bit busier than Adelaide, so we
No, but that is being done from Southampton.
Right, which is how far away?
150 kilometres, which is around about 100 nautical miles.
Presumably they'd have a different system in place.
Sorry, Senator, I'm not sure what you mean by different system.
I mean, presumably the risks would be managed in a particular way. Are you saying...
No different to the risks that we would manage with normal air traffic in a terminal control unit.
So you're saying that the Southampton risk management would be the same as the risk management that Air Services has used?
Both of them are providing approach control services into aerodromes, and as you pointed out, that Heathrow Airport is Europe's busiest airport, and it's able to be done remotely.
Now, in the Terminal Control Unit strategic business case from May 2014, the cost of replacing ageing infrastructure facilities at Adelaide is quoted at $7.8 million. Does that ring a bell, Mr Logan?
That sounds right, Senator.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the net figures.
If this replacement of facilities in Adelaide is required, and it is, and I suggest to you it may be a big if, how can Air Services justify the expense on rescue and firefighting facilities at other at other smaller airports, which I'm not begrudging at all, but there's a significant costs of funding rescue and firefighting, which I'm not having any issue with. But in relative terms, you're not spending the money on replacing terminal control unit here.
It may assist if you talk to the microphone a bit more.
Sorry. I'm microphone shy, Chair, as you know.
Not the camera. Just put irony in brackets.
Senator, can I just...
Yeah, there was some irony there.
Senator, can I just clarify the premise of the question? We have to
Well, can I go
fund...
back to the premise of the question? It's my mistake for not asking it. What has been the cost to air services and thus travelling public of rescue and firefighting facilities at Karratha, Newman, Gladstone and Ballina, which of course I don't have any issue with. Of course they need to have proper rescue and firefighting equipment. What's the cost been approximately for those places?
Senator, the cost of operating an airport at those locations is in the order of $4.5 million per annum,
Right.
which includes staffing, it includes a depreciation component for the infrastructure put in terms of complying with the CASA regulations to meet those service requirements.
Okay. I'll put some of these questions on notice. I do have some questions to ask, then I'm out of here, Chair, for Air Services, about TASWAM, something that Mr Dick Smith's been commenting on in the media. Are you able to provide the original project objectives for TASWAM as well as the project risk register? Can you provide those as part of the inspection
Provide that
process?
on notice, Senator.
Yes, sure. And in particular, could you advise the extent of the regulatory risk identified, including the evolving risk as the project proceeded, and the mitigation strategies put in place to avoid what appears to be the current impasse where you say it will do the job but CASA won't let you use it as intended? That seems to be one of the issues that seems live on this.
Can I just make a correction to there? That is not
Please
what
do.
CASA said has said no to what was intended. When we put in the Tasmanian wide area multilateration, it was to improve the surveillance in Tasmania because prior to 2004 there was no surveillance whatsoever in Tasmania. There was a near miss over the head of Launceston in late 2003 that caused us to put a temporary radar into Launceston. Unfortunately, the temporary radar in Launceston 1 was temporary, but it also didn't give very much coverage around Hobart. So in order to upgrade that, we put in wide area multilateration. The wide area multilateration is not only the 14 sites, each of those 14 sites are also ADS-B antennas, which means that the coverage in Launceston in Hobart is the best surveillance coverage there is in Australia. What we use the wide area multilateration for is used by the en route controller in Melbourne to provide separation services using radar-like separation services, which then hand off to both either the Hobart or Launceston Tower to manage the aircraft. The cut-off point of where we provide the radar separation services using TASWAM, which it is certified to by CASA, is where the en route controller hands off to the tower, who does not need to use that particular service because they have a range of other tools to be able to manage the aircraft.
So will One Sky solve the problems that Tasmania is experiencing, do you think?
What problems are you talking about in Tasmania?
Well, in terms of the issues that were raised by Mr Dick Smith, do you think One Sky will deal with any of the issues that Mr Smith has been critical of Air Services about?
One Sky isn't designed to actually solve those particular issues because the issues that Mr Smith has an opinion on are to do with the surveillance coverage, which is actually independent of the One Sky system.